She spent 2 months sleeping in hospital chairs, holding his hand, whispering their memories into his unconscious ears. When he finally opened his eyes and asked, "Who are you?" Those 3 words destroyed a love story 5 years in the making. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came 6 months later, when she walked into his photography studio and heard him introduce another woman as his fiancée. "Hey, beautiful souls. I need to warn you about today's story. Grab some tissues because this one hit me differently. Welcome to the Arabian Dilemma Diaries. Now, this story comes from the Middle East, so some of the cultural stuff around relationships might feel different from what you're used to. But trust me, the emotions, the heartbreak, that's universal. We've all loved someone who became a stranger, right? This happened in Aleppo, and I'm telling you, it's the kind of story that makes you realize how fragile everything we hold dear really is. Bassem and Fairez had been inseparable since elementary school. They were complete opposites. Bassem was the quiet one, thoughtful and respectful, the kind of person who never raised his voice. Fairez was his complete opposite, full of energy, always getting into trouble, the type who turned every day into an adventure. But somehow, these differences made their friendship stronger. Both boys were only children, so they became each other's brothers. Their families knew each other well, and it wasn't unusual to find one sleeping over at the other's house. They shared everything: dreams, secrets, and eventually, a business plan. Living in their neighborhood was a girl named Lara, 3 years younger than Bassem. She lived next door and went to the same school. Every morning, Bassem would walk her to school and bring her home safely, just like a protective older brother. Her parents trusted him completely. As they grew up and moved into high school, something started changing. Lara was becoming beautiful, the kind of beauty that turned heads. But for Bassem, she was still just the little neighbor girl he'd always protected. He never saw her as anything more than a sister. Fairez, however, started noticing Lara differently. What began as childhood admiration grew into something deeper during their teenage years. And Lara? She felt the same way about Fairez. By their final year of high school, they were openly in love, making plans for their future together. Fairez completely changed because of Lara. This boy who used to barely care about his grades started studying seriously. Lara wanted to study engineering, and Fairez decided he'd follow the same path so they could be together. Love had given him focus and ambition. Their relationship was the kind that made everyone around them believe in love. Fairez would find any excuse to buy her gifts, to celebrate small moments with her. Both families accepted their relationship. They were young, but everyone could see this was real. They got into engineering school together, worked hard, and spent every day planning their future. The deal was simple. After graduation, after they both found jobs, Fairez would officially ask for her hand in marriage. Everyone in both families already considered them engaged. Wherever they went, Fairez would introduce Lara as his fiancée, and she'd proudly call him her fiancé. Meanwhile, Bassem and Fairez had started their own photography business, shooting weddings, events, portraits. They'd begun it during university, but after graduation, they were ready to make it their full-time career. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Fairez had a big photography job, a wedding celebration in a town between Damascus and Tartus. To save money, he took the public bus, carrying all his equipment with him. The plan was simple: 2 days of work, then back home to the life he was building. But sometimes life has different plans. The bus accident happened on a dark road. The other driver lost control, crashing head-on into the bus. The bus flipped over. It was 1996, and this accident made headlines because of how devastating it was. Over 40 people were on that bus. Some died instantly, others were critically injured. Ferris was among the survivors, but barely. When the bus flipped, his head hit the ceiling with tremendous force. The impact caused a deep wound and a fractured skull with internal bleeding. They rushed him to the hospital and performed emergency surgery. The operation went well, but Ferris didn't wake up. For 3 weeks, Lara never left the hospital. Day and night, she sat by his bedside, crying, praying, refusing to go home even when her family begged her to rest. "He might wake up and not see me there," she'd tell them. "I need to be the first person he sees." When Ferris finally started opening his eyes, the doctors were cautiously optimistic. But they needed to monitor him carefully, which meant no visitors, not even Lara. She fought them on this. "Please, let me stay. What if something happens and I'm not here?" But the doctors were firm. "His condition is stable now. Go home, rest, and we'll call you when you can visit." Reluctantly, she went home for 2 days. Then the call came. She could see him. When Lara arrived at the hospital, she found Ferris's family there, but their faces looked strange, like they were hiding something. "I want to see him," she said. "Wait," they said. "We need to tell you something first. Thank God his health is good and everything is stable, but Ferris has lost his memory." "What do you mean?" "He doesn't remember anyone. Not his parents, not his family, not his friends. He remembers basic things about life, but he doesn't recognize any people or have any memories with them. Don't be shocked, and let's help him try to remember." When Lara walked into his room, Ferris looked at her with polite confusion. "Excuse me, who are you?" he asked. The words hit her like a physical blow. This was the man who had called her the love of his life just weeks ago, and now he was asking who she was. I'm a friend," she managed to say. "We were worried about you." He nodded politely, the way you'd acknowledge any stranger who showed concern. Lara spent the next 2 months visiting Ferris in the hospital every day. He was puzzled by her dedication. Why was this friend spending more time with him than even his parents did? But since he couldn't remember anything, he didn't know if this was normal or not. She'd tell him stories about their school days, their friendship, keeping things light. The doctors had warned her not to shock him with too much information at once. When Ferris was finally released from the hospital, the doctors gave a sobering prognosis. He might recover his memory, or he might not. Some people remembered after a year, others after 20 years. Some never remembered at all. Lara continued visiting Ferris at home, but it became increasingly awkward. She'd spend hours there while he treated her like a casual acquaintance. Her family started pressuring her. "This isn't appropriate," they'd say. "A young woman spending hours at a man's house like this. In the hospital, we understood, but now, people are talking. If he truly wants to be with you, he should come and officially ask for your hand. Until then, this has to stop." Even Ferris's family felt uncomfortable. Here was this beautiful young woman dedicating her life to someone who barely acknowledged her presence. Eventually, her family forbade her from visiting. She could only call to check on him. Months passed. Ferris's health improved, and he returned to work at the photography studio. But he'd forgotten everything about photography too. Bassem, loyal as always, told him not to worry. "You rest, handle the customers and bookings. I'll do the photography until you remember." Bassam never abandoned his friend, even though this new version of Ferris was different, harder, less warm than the person he'd grown up with. But Bassam noticed something heartbreaking. Ferris truly showed no signs of remembering Lara. If anything, he seemed bothered by her constant attention. Bassam tried talking to Lara gently. "I think you need to accept that Ferris is a different person now. I hate to see you wasting your life waiting for something that might never happen. You've put your career, your dreams, everything on hold for someone who doesn't even remember loving you." Lara wouldn't hear it. "This is temporary. His memory will come back, and will be better than before." Then came the day Bassam called Lara to come to the studio urgently. When she arrived, she found Ferris sitting close to another woman, laughing and talking with her in a way that made it obvious he was interested in her. Lara felt like a ghost watching her own life be lived by someone else. When she asked to be introduced, Ferris casually said, "This is my fiancé." The words shattered what was left of Lara's heart. Bassam quickly took her outside as she broke down completely. "I brought you here so you could see the truth with your own eyes," he said gently. "Ferris has been dating this woman for months. They're planning to get married officially. He doesn't remember you, Lara, and I couldn't keep letting you live in false hope. Even his family knows about her. They feel terrible about what happened to you, but they can't stop their son from living his life, especially after he almost died." What could Lara say? The man she'd planned to marry, the person she'd nursed back to health, had moved on without even a memory of their love. She went home and told her family everything. They were heartbroken for her, but not surprised. "We tried to warn you," they said gently. "Real love, lasting love, comes with commitment and marriage. What you had was beautiful, but it wasn't protected by any real bond. We're sorry it ended this way, but now you need to rebuild your life." Lara fell into a deep depression. Meanwhile, Ferris married his new love and seemed genuinely happy. The friendship between Bassam and Ferris also began to crumble. This new version of Ferris was different, more selfish, less loyal. Since everything was legally in Ferris's name, he started hinting that he could kick Bassam out anytime he wanted. "Don't forget, everything's in my name. I could ask you to leave whenever I want," he'd say, sometimes jokingly, sometimes not so jokingly. Eventually, they agreed to part ways. Bassam took his share of their investment and left, ending a friendship that had lasted their entire lives. 2 years later, Bassam heard surprising news about Lara. After her period of grief and depression, she'd thrown herself into her career with fierce determination. She'd started her own engineering company and was thriving. She had employees, major contracts, and had built something impressive from nothing. You know what? I really admire this about her story. It would have been easy for Lara to stay stuck in that heartbreak forever, but she chose differently. She chose to build something new from the pieces of her broken dreams. Bassam, curious about how she was doing, decided to visit her office. "Bassam, how are you?" Lara welcomed him warmly. "Look at us, where we were and where we are now." "God has blessed you," he said, looking around her successful business. "You've moved on and forgotten the past." "And you?" she asked. "Hello, Bassam," Lara greeted him warmly. "How are you?" "Where do I even begin?" he replied with a rueful smile. "It's been over a year since I've had steady work. You know, I don't have a university degree like you. Photography was all I knew." Here's where it gets interesting, folks. Bassam did something that surprised them both. Perhaps it was desperation, or seeing her success made him realize what he'd lost, but he decided to bare his heart. "Lara, I need to tell you something I've hidden for years. I've loved you since before you even knew Ferris existed. I was dying for you, but I was too shy. When Ferris pursued you, I stepped aside because I thought that's what friends did. But watching you two together ended my life 1,000 times a day. Can you imagine? All those years of quiet friendship, and she never suspected. Lara was stunned, but her response was firm. Stop. Please, Bassam. I learned my lesson with Ferris. I will never again let my heart rule my head. If I marry, it will be traditional, arranged by family, built on respect rather than passion. You are dear to me, but only as a brother. Still, she had a heart of gold. When Bassam asked for work, she immediately agreed. With all my heart. If it's about work, about building something professional between us, then yes, I'll support you until my last breath. For nearly 5 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. Lara's business flourished, she moved to a better neighborhood, bought land, became respected in her field. Marriage proposals came regularly, but she rejected them all for practical reasons. Bassam remained by her side, professional by day, hopeful by night. But fate wasn't finished with their story. Everything changed when Ferris fell critically ill with a high fever. For days, he hovered between life and death in intensive care. When he finally recovered, something extraordinary happened. The illness had done something to his brain. Buried memories began surfacing with startling clarity. And devastatingly, Ferris began remembering how much he'd truly loved Lara. When did we get married? He asked his wife one morning, staring at her like a stranger. The memories came flooding back. Lara, his first love, the woman he'd abandoned. How had he married someone else? How had he forgotten the one person who meant everything? His obsession with the past grew alarming. When he learned Bassam no longer worked for him, Ferris rushed to make amends. Forgive me, he pleaded. I don't know what happened to me. I lost my memory. Eventually, Ferris found Lara's company and stormed into her office. I love you, he declared. My memory has returned. I don't know how I could have married someone else. Lara's response was ice cold. Get out. Whether your memory returned or not is none of my business. You are finished and over. When he refused to leave, she called the police. They escorted him out and made him sign a pledge not to approach her again, but obsession doesn't listen to legal documents. Here's where this story takes a truly dark turn. Ferris became a man possessed, following Lara, begging her family to intercede. At home, he told his wife, I don't know you. You deceived me. When she said, then divorce me, he replied without hesitation, you are divorced, caring nothing for his children watching their world collapse. But even this meant nothing to Lara. She was horrified, not flattered. I never asked you to divorce your wife. Think of your children. I will never accept you. Never. The rejection transformed his obsession into something sinister. He began showing up at Bassam's workplace, disheveled and wild-eyed. I've loaded my gun, Ferris said one evening. I'm going to end Lara's life and yours too if there's anything between you. Then he revealed his truly evil plan. I'll force her to marry me. I'll kidnap her, do unspeakable things to her. Then she'll have no choice. Who else would want her after that? Bassam was horrified by this twisted logic. Finally, Ferris seemed to calm down, but Bassam knew better. He began shadowing Lara everywhere, never letting her go anywhere alone. Just when peace seemed possible, a young man from a respectable family came to propose. He was educated, well off, everything her family hoped for. I'll marry him, Lara decided. It's time I moved on. The wedding was lavish, a grand hall filled with guests, music, and celebration. Lara looked radiant in her white dress, finally the bride she'd dreamed of being. But then the unthinkable happened. Are you ready for this? The groom stood up, took the microphone, and announced to the stunned crowd, I cannot marry a woman who has had relationships with 2 men before me, one named Bassem and another named Ferris. I divorce her here and now, before all of you as witnesses. Can you imagine the shock? The hall erupted in chaos. Lara sat frozen on the wedding dais as her world collapsed for the second time. Her family, humiliated beyond belief, rushed her from the hall in her wedding dress. For 3 days, Lara remained in that wedding dress like a ghost. She refused to eat, barely drank water, and whispered about the cruel twist of fate that had destroyed 2 wedding days. And then Ferris appeared at their door. I'm ready to marry her now. I'll cover for her, restore her honor. The family threw him out violently, but Lara knew with sickening certainty who was behind her humiliation. But here's where the story gets its redemption. In a moment that changed everything, Lara called Bassem. Do you still love me? More than life itself, he replied. Then come tonight. Bring the marriage officiant. I want to marry you. Tonight. The midnight wedding was surreal. Bassem gathered his bewildered family and rushed to Lara's house. Her family watched as their daughter, still in her wedding dress from the failed ceremony, married the man she should have chosen from the beginning. But the best part? Justice came swiftly. Under pressure from community leaders, the truth emerged. Ahmad, the fake groom, confessed everything. Ferris paid me 3 million Syrian pounds. He told me to propose to Lara, then divorce her publicly to break her spirit. The entire courtship, wedding, and humiliating divorce had been an elaborate, cruel scheme orchestrated by a man who couldn't accept rejection. The legal consequences were severe. Faris and Ahmad faced charges of fraud, defamation, and conspiracy. They were ordered to pay 4 million pounds compensation to Lara. With the settlement money, Lara bought a beautiful villa where she and Bassem started their new life. Their business prospered, children filled their home with laughter, and the community that witnessed Lara's humiliation now saw her triumph. Years later, their story became legend in Aleppo, a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride, the power of patience, and how love can conquer cruelty. The wedding dress, cleaned and preserved, hung in their closet, no longer a symbol of shame, but a reminder of resilience. Sometimes the heart truly does know what the mind cannot understand.